We're still on a journey to hope. And on the journey to hope, we just have to testify sometimes. Sometimes a testimony is required. Our text this morning is from the Gospel of Mark. Mark has been leading us on this journey to hope. And we're going to read from the 14th chapter, verses 43 through 65. And so hear these gospel words from the Gospel of Mark. Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Am I leading a rebellion, said Jesus, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man, wearing nothing but a linen garment, was following Jesus. And when they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another not made with hands. Yet even then their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? I am, said Jesus. And you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do you need any more witnesses? He asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? And they all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, Prophesy. And the guards took him and beat him. This is the gospel of the Lord for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Would you pray with me? Help us to hear you, Lord. And help us to know how to give true testimony from your word through Christ. Amen. I'm called to give testimony of Jesus Christ and his identity. Many people give testimony of Jesus. Many people give false testimony of Jesus. I have been trained, have gone to seminary, have read books, and have studied, and I know what the church says and who the church say Jesus is. I know what church history say about Jesus and his identity. And so that was a long time ago. But today, how am I to give testimony to who Jesus is? What am I to say about Jesus and who he is today? Who do you say Jesus is? This is an important question. But you see, as followers of Jesus, as Christians, we need to know who Jesus is. Not just what he's done, but who he is. And that was the problem with the religious leaders when Jesus went before them to trial. And we pick up in verse 53. 53 through 65 describes this court proceeding. Now, I've never given testimony in a court. Never sat in a witness stand to talk about what I've seen and what I know. There were times when I perhaps should have been called to give testimony. Growing up, I've witnessed lots of things that a child shouldn't witness. I've witnessed murders, killings, and beatings, and all sort of things that should have gone to court, gone to trial, but I've never been called to the witness stand. But here Jesus was before these religious leaders, the elders, the Sanhedrin, the people who knew the law. And there were some who were giving testimony. And they were giving false testimony. They were giving false testimony because they wanted to be sure that Jesus was convicted and put to death. And so they made up things. They took, partial truths and gave testimony. That happens today sometimes, doesn't it? Where people tend to, because they want someone to be persecuted, they want things to happen to someone, they give false testimony to who and what has happened in certain situations. And that's exactly what happened to Jesus. They were the one thing that some people gave testimony to was that they said Jesus was going to tear down the temple and build it back in 3 days. Now, Jesus didn't say he was going to tear down the temple himself. He said it was going to be destroyed, but he didn't say he was going to do it. And his identity was what the problem was. You see, they weren't concerned about what he was going to do, but who he was. So they were asking, they were making false statements, and then the high priest, realized that these were false statements. The Hebrew law said that it took 2 witnesses against someone. So you have to have 2 people who saw the same thing and whose testimony was the same. These people couldn't agree on their testimony. And so they violated one of the Hebrew laws, not being able to do that. And then the 9th commandment, they just totally ignored and destroyed the 9th commandment. The 9th commandment said, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." And that's what they were doing. They were witnessing falsely against Jesus. Now, the high priest just kind of got sick of that and decided to start that line of questioning because they weren't getting any place. So he was pretty direct. He asked Jesus. He said, well, why aren't you answering these things? And Jesus was even silent then. There was no point in answering false witness. But then the high priest asked Jesus, are you the Messiah? Are you the one from God? And Jesus said, I am. I am the Son of Man. Well, the Sanhedrin knew exactly what he was talking about, because that's the language that was used in Daniel. When Daniel saw a vision, he saw a human who was prepared to come on behalf of the people, who was going to come and suffer for the people. And they knew that this was going to be the Messiah. The Sanhedrin, the folks who knew the law and knew the Bible, knew exactly what Jesus was talking about when he called himself the Son of Man, being in human form, coming on behalf of the people. And the high priest said, why do we need any more witnesses? He's just blaspheming. That's enough in itself. What do you think? And they said, well, blasphemy is a death sentence. And so we're gonna kill him. We're gonna kill him not because of what he's done, but because of who he is. Who do you say Jesus is? Who is he to you? We all ought to have a testimony about our experiences with Jesus and what Jesus has done for us and who he is.